Hi, welcome to the Dynamics AX 2009 demonstration of inventory management. In this presentation today, we're going to be talking about multi-organizations and multi-warehouse support, item master, bills and materials and routes, costing of bills and routes, ABC analysis, and warehouse management. We're beginning at the Role Center of Operation Manager, and here we see a graphical representation of important information being pushed to us. In this case, we have delivery statistics, actual versus planned consumption, defect ratios, etc. We can also see our work list, which are alerts and workflow, and my links. We will begin this presentation talking about the multi-org structure. Let's look at our locations view. Here we have a graphical representation of all the companies in our enterprise. As I scroll to the right, we see the company and we see the sites that have been specified. For today's demonstration purpose, let's look at Contasso Entertainment Systems. By clicking on this CEU icon and hitting the up arrow, it'll explode this view, and now sites are running horizontal, and below each site we can see the warehouse. Notice there can be different types of warehouse: a main warehouse, a vendor warehouse, quarantine, transit, etc. We can also further explode a particular site. We'll click the up arrow on site 2, and now we can explode across each of the warehouses and see specific information such as aisle. If we would like more information on this site 2 warehouse, click the up arrow and it explodes it down to the locations and their types. So now that we see every aisle in our particular warehouse and the types of locations identified with that aisle, we might also be interested in seeing the on-hand for a particular location. By clicking the location in the ribbon bar, it brings up for us the warehouse locations and type, the pallet information. By selecting a particular warehouse and location, we can easily see the on-hand. On-hand can be broken down to us by physical, inventory, physical reserved, available physical, order total, on order, order reserved, and total available. Let's take a moment to go back to our Contasso Entertainment Systems, and let's look at setting up items. By clicking on items, this is our item master, or item detail form. It lists for us all of the items in our system. You'll notice there's multiple different item types. There's a type of item, BOM, and service. We can filter on any of these fields as you saw in the overview. By double-clicking, we get to the detail of our record. We'll see some things here in the General tab of interest to us, such as item name and search name, the date the item is active, all the different groups which provide us more detail in setting up. For example, the item group allows us to classify or categorize our items into televisions, receivers, recorders. The item group, if we right-click and go to Main Table, shows us some more information about how AX 2009 will handle this particular group of items. So, for example, our group 1000 is in the item group televisions. By clicking the Sales Order tab, we can see some information about how we handle this item group on a sales order, such as the GL account codes for packing slips, invoices, commissions. The Purchase Order tab, likewise, we see our accounting information for packing slips, invoices, credit notes. Again, we have the same information for inventory as well as for production. The inventory model group says, how do we manage this item in our inventory? Do we manage it as a standard cost or FIFO, LIFO? Perhaps we need to quarantine this item or warehouse manage it. The dimension group gives us further detail of the item. Is it also driven by color, size, and style? Let's look at the details supporting our dimension group. The inventory dimension groups allow us to manage an item at an item dimension level. So, for example, for this particular item belongs to dimension group NW, which is basically a standard, but it's warehouse controlled. And at the item dimension level, we can track configuration, size, and color. This particular item we're not tracking any of those three. But if we were, we would have an option of saying, is it mandatory that we know configuration size and or color? Do we primarily stock to that level? Could we receive without knowing the color? Could we issue without knowing the size? Do we physical and financial inventory to that level of detail? The bottom portion of the screen shows us storage dimensions. In other words, to what level do we track and store this particular item or group of items? In this case, site and warehouse are active. So it is mandatory that we know the site. Primary stocking is to a site and warehouse level as well. We can see blank receipt could be allowed. So for example, if we were tracking to a lot number, which is indicated by a batch number, we could receive without knowing that particular lot number. We could also issue without knowing it. Are we physical inventorying to which level? To a site, to a warehouse, a location, or a pallet ID? Same with financial inventory. Very powerful. The inventory dimensions give us granular control of our items. Walking across the top, we can see some of the other tabs for setup, pricing, dimensions, references. How do we handle this item on a purchase order or a sales order? Pricing and discounting, the purchase price, cost price, and sales price. Right from our item detail form, we can also click and see what transactions we have for this particular item. So here we see all the sales orders, quarantine orders, or purchase orders that exist for this item. We can also see our on hand by warehouse. With our counting group, we can group items into counting groups, which allow us to determine when and how this item is counted. These counting groups are user-defined. For counting group number 10, if we look at the detail behind it, it's a manual counting group. The counting code is manual. However, we could have chosen manual, period, zero in stock, or minimum. In other words, do we count this item manually whenever we'd like, within a certain period of time, in other words, every 3 months, or perhaps when the item has nothing in stock, or when it reaches our minimum coverage. On the Setup button, I'd like to discuss default order settings and site-specific order settings. Default order settings allow us to determine, for this particular item, if we're dealing with a purchase order, an inventory transaction, or a sales order, what are some of the default settings we would like? So for example, for a purchase order, our default purchase unit is each. The default purchase site is 2. By clicking mandatory, we make that site mandatory. Purchase quantities, we can purchase in multiples. We can indicate minimum order, maximum order, and standard order quantities, as well as lead time working days. In the inventory tab, we'll see we can also indicate the inventory unit, a site. Under inventory quantity, the same information of multiple order quantities. We can also indicate ATP, delivery date controls, and time fences. On the sales order tab, very similar information. So for a particular item, we can determine what default settings we would like to indicate for an order, or we have the same settings for the site. We can also set up trade agreements. So what pricing discounts do we have? Are these trade agreements for sales or purchase price? Would we like to set up supplementary sales items? So whenever we sell this item, we can upsell or always include something, such as an extension cord, as well as supplementary purchase items. Additionally, directly from the item master, we can click and see our bill of material. We can also see forecasting for purchase, sales, and inventory. But let's take a moment and let's look at our bill of material. By clicking on Designer, we get a graphical view of the bill of material for our particular item. You'll see on the left-hand side, with this being our finished good and our components listed below, we could also add components to this item by double-clicking, and our components immediately added. You'll see in this particular case, this component is a subassembly. I'd also like to point out on the right-hand side is the route that goes with this particular subassembly. We can also delete lines from this bill of material at this time, edit our route, create different versions of our route or our bill. So if we have access, we have full control of our bill of material right from our item detail form. In Dynamics AX 2009, bills of material can be created for standard bills, configure to order, simple bills, and engineering bills. Let's take a moment and look where this material was set up.